like to take this time to share one of my favorite childhood memories. Growing up here in San Jose, I was blessed to grow up with my family who immigrated here from Mexico. This picture that you see was taken in the backyard of my grandparents' house in East San Jose, and we'll dive more into that later. But what you see in this moment is we were planting seeds for corn. My grandfather loves agriculture. He made sure to have a garden in his house, and one summer he planted corn. And I remember that day where all the grandchildren came out and we were picking the corn, and I remember the sun on my face and the ladybugs and the leaves, and yes, the corn was a little dry, but it was such a fun day. It's one of my favorite, most cherished childhood memories, and it happened here in San Jose. And I'm glad to hear that you were all able to open up and share those stories that remind you of home and childhood, because housing is a personal issue. And it's important that we make space to connect on a deeper level about how housing impacts each one of us. Today, I want to share my own housing story with you. Next slide, please. So 50 years ago, my grandfather, Flaviano, arrived to the U.S. as part of the Bracero program. He had a 5th grade level education, and it was not for a lack of trying. He took 5th grade 3 times, not because he couldn't pass, but because the village that he lived in Oaxaca did not have a middle school, and he cared so deeply about education that he knew if he wanted a better future for himself, for his children, for his grandchildren, and generations beyond, a change had to be made. So he moved his family to the U.S. And for 25 years, he worked as a custodian at St. Mary's School in Los Gatos. With this salary, he bought a house in East San Jose, where I got a chance to grow up in a multi-generational household, living with my aunts, my uncles, my cousins, my grandparents, and I learned family values. I watched my grandpa leave work in the morning, taking a bus from East San Jose to Los Gatos every day. And I watched my aunts, who were small business owners, take turns to pick their dad up from work and bring him back home. Growing up, my parents and I lived in rented rooms, bouncing between downtown and East San Jose. But 30 years ago, my parents, here in the audience with us today, my dad working in manufacturing, my mom working in the food service industry, were able to purchase their first house in San Jose. And now, even with a bachelor's degree, the highest level of education that anyone in my family has ever had, I'm 30 years young and nowhere near homeownership the way my parents and my grandparents had that opportunity years ago. I live at home with my family, like 30% of all millennials do. So as the eldest daughter in an immigrant family, it is no surprise that I didn't choose the life of public service. The life of public service chose me. Naturally, I majored in social science and studied child development at San Jose State. And this led me to understand the power and potential within each one of us. You see, what I learned in my classes at San Jose State was that 95% of the brain develops in the first 5 years. This is incredibly powerful knowledge that we now all hold today. Because if you didn't know, when you're a baby, your brain is gray matter. So it is literally like a sponge, waiting to take in information that will create these synapses in your neurons that are creating memories, creating ways of thinking, ways of being. And that is why the first 5 years are so important. So if you take any message home with you today, it's this: early intervention matters. The sooner, the better. Empowered with this reality, I began a mission to ensure that our children were on a pathway to success from cradle to career. My journey took me to study abroad in Mexico, where I spent many days visiting my grandpa's pueblo in Oaxaca. I dreamed of opening a preschool there one day that would support women's economic mobility. This journey also taught me about the youth growing up in our foster care system. I became a CASA, a court-appointed special advocate, to help bring stability into the lives of our foster youth whose only desire is to be loved and to feel seen. As a CASA, I was matched with a farm-working family living in South County. This family was full of so much love, and I wanted nothing more than to see them successfully complete their reunification process. And while we all know that all you need is love, I knew that this family deserved more to support their future success. Because the environment that this family was living in was unhealthy and unsafe. But they were happy because they were together. Any person would be and should be alarmed with their living conditions. A wooden frame covered by a tin roof. No insulation, no appliances, just a propane tank in a makeshift kitchen that left a smell reeking of natural gas. It reminded me of the rural villages I visited in Oaxaca. But this story has a happy ending. When another family member moved into town, they doubled up and split the rent of a 2-bedroom apartment. But we have to ask ourselves, are these really the best living conditions we have to offer our children and their families? It's experiences like the ones that I had as a CASA that taught me to focus on the problems in my own backyard before going out and trying to save the world. On the campaign trail for City Council, I was always asked, why? Why City Council and not school board? Why you? Why now? The answer is simple. San Jose is in dire need of leaders who will champion our youngest and most vulnerable residents. Our children depend on us for everything. And what do we have to offer them? A society where your zip code determines the entire trajectory of your life, from where you'll go to school to the age of your life expectancy? Let's not be that society. In this room, we harness the power of community. There is no reason why in the Silicon Valley, with an abundance of wealth, knowledge, and talent, that we cannot solve the problem of youth homelessness. This is not what San Jose should be known for. Our housing and homelessness epidemic is not what should be making headlines in Silicon Valley. We are a community of innovation and forward thinkers. But we cannot move forward until we acknowledge what is holding us back. So I had the opportunity to be part of a learning tour of the social housing that was built in Vienna. And what Vienna taught me is what is possible when we invest for the long term. When we plant trees, not merely for our own benefit, but for generations to come. I share with you 3 key takeaways from my trip to Vienna. First, they found themselves in a position quite like where we find ourselves today. Housing was unavailable, and what was available to the working class communities was unlivable. People were dying of diseases. And what happened was a decision to take action and put people first. By putting people first, Vienna focused on children and developing a child-centered city because they understood the power of building for the future and that it means building for the children of today. when you create safe streets for children, when you create sidewalks that are big enough for a stroller, you are building sidewalks that are big enough for walkers and for wheelchairs. When you are investing in open space so that children can grow up and thrive with green, clean spaces, you are investing in healthier communities for everybody. And when we invest in housing for all, we are supporting the economy, because people who do not have to spend and save on rent can spend on local small businesses, local entrepreneurs, local restaurants, which are the lifelines of our community. When we build cities for children, it's simple. We build communities where everybody can thrive. So today, I am excited to share my vision for what is possible here in our community. Our reality is stark. McKinney-Vento data tells us that we have 2,244 unhoused students living in San Jose. Last week, City of San Jose reported that 30% of the individuals encountered while clearing our creeks and our waterways were single women with children. We have underbuilt for families. We are unprepared for federal cuts to health care, Head Start, and housing vouchers. Now is the moment for leadership that recognizes the true needs of our families. The framework is simple. We are building a community that supports and puts the whole child first. We are creating the village that it takes to raise a child. We are working to make San Jose a city that puts children first. And if you ask me why children, why? I ask you to remember what I shared early on about the brain and how in the first 5 years, the elasticity that is developing, 95% of all that child will know is why children. And if that isn't captivating enough, this quote by Frederick Douglass is what keeps me grounded in this reality. Because he said that it is easier to build strong children than it is to repair broken men. When we invest in our children, we invest in our future. So, I recently watched Mr. Rogers' Emmy Award speech. Kiyomi, I really did. She asked me to many, many times. I had to. And what he said really moved me, and I'd like to share it with you today. All of us have special ones who have loved us into being. In this moment, will you take 10 seconds to think of the people who have helped you become who you are, those who have cared about you and wanted what was best for you in life? 10 seconds. I'll watch the timer. Whomever you've been thinking about, how pleased they must be to know the difference you feel they've made. My final ask of you today, to all of us, is to ask ourselves, how can we be that person for someone else?